My parents sold our home and vanished. Months later, I uncovered the truth they buried, and exposing it made their carefully built world crumble. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 20 years old and currently a sophomore majoring in political science at the University of Oregon. When I drove 5 hours back to my hometown of Medford for spring break, I never imagined that the moment I stepped out of my car would be the moment my world came crashing down. Right in front of me, the house I grew up in stood hollow and empty. A bold for sale sign planted in the middle of the front lawn announced the truth like a slap in the face. The curtains were gone. No car in the garage, no lights, no sounds. I thought I had the wrong address until I noticed the street lamp with the crack I once tripped over in elementary school. Everything was in the exact same place I used to call home, except it wasn't mine anymore. 3 black trash bags sat squarely on the front steps. I staggered up the porch, head spinning. My trembling hands untied one of the bags. Inside were the red sweater my mom gave me last winter, a few textbooks, and a cracked photo frame showing me standing between my parents at my high school graduation. "Aber," I called my mom. No answer. I tried my dad. After 3 rings, he picked up. "I'm standing in front of the house. Where is everything? What is going on, Dad?" His voice was flat, emotionless. "We moved. Don't make a big deal. Figure it out yourself." "Aber? Wait, what are you saying? You moved without telling me? You're an adult now. Handle it." Before I could say anything else, he hung up. The cold click from the other end hit me harder than any words could. "Aber," I called again, busy. Then it went straight to voicemail. I tried my sister. No answer. In disbelief, I dialed again. A third time, a fourth, but there was only silence. I stood frozen as the light of the afternoon began to fade. The wind whispered through the bare branches in the front yard where my sister and I used to hang Christmas lights every year. Everything suddenly felt unfamiliar, like a half-forgotten dream I never wanted to revisit. One question echoed in my mind. Did they ever really consider me part of the family? I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not because I was strong, but because everything had happened so fast that even my emotions couldn't catch up. I gathered each heavy trash bag and stuffed them into my car trunk as if I were collecting the shattered remnants of a life I no longer belonged to. That night, I stayed at a roadside motel. The bed creaked with every move, and the thin blanket felt colder than the silence I'd been left in. I unpacked what I could. Some notebooks, a few winter clothes, an old laptop, and a small journal with a bent cover. No letter, no note, not even a scrap of explanation. Only silence and 3 trash bags. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had been reckless, irresponsible. I might have understood, but I was the one who sent part of my paycheck home every month. I never asked for anything. I tried every day to be someone they could be proud of. And yet, this was what I got. Abandoned, as if I never mattered. Bro. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my last messages with my mom. The most recent one was from 2 weeks ago. "Don't forget your coat. It's cold out. No warning, no clue." That was when I understood. If they chose to erase me from their lives, I'd do the same, not out of hatred, but by walking a path they'd never be part of again. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, named it New Beginning. Lying on that motel bed, soft yellow light from the bedside lamp casting blurred shapes on the ceiling, I couldn't sleep. Memories surfaced like bubbles in water. Moments I used to treasure as proof I had a home to return to. I was always the safe child, never loud, never demanding. While my classmates went out on weekends, I stayed in to study. When parties happened in the dorm, I worked extra shifts at the library. Every time I received scholarship aid, I wired some home to Mom. Sometimes $50, or more if I earned extra at the campus cafe. It never felt like a duty. I just wanted to help, to be seen. But in our house, the one who got protected was not me. It was my younger brother, Kyle. Kyle is 3 years younger. He struggled academically, changed schools 3 times in 2 years for being a bad fit. He was once caught smoking behind the high school and even shattered a neighbor's window during an argument. Yet every time something happened, Mom rushed to his defense. "He's just a kid. He doesn't know better. Boys are impulsive sometimes. At least he doesn't run away like some kids do. Ibrahim and me, I never ran away, but I was the one left behind." Once in 11th grade, I won 2nd place in a statewide essay contest and was invited to be honored at the school board meeting. I was so excited I invited the whole family. That night, Dad said Kyle had a stomachache. No one came. I stood on stage alone, hands cold, eyes trying not to scan the empty chairs. Kyle once got suspended for spray painting "No More Lies" on a school wall. Dad met with the principal, came home angry, but still gave him a motorbike for his 17th birthday. Me, I got a $20 gift card. It was never about the money. I just wanted fairness. But in our house, silence, obedience, and sacrifice seemed to be the easiest things to forget. Now I don't have to wonder anymore. They made it clear with their actions. They threw me out along with 3 trash bags. I scrolled down old texts with Kyle. The last one I sent was, "Don't stay up gaming too late. Finals are coming." His last message, a thumbs up emoji. Sent almost 4 months ago. Looking back now, I find it absurd. They had arranged everything behind my back. Selling the house, moving out, without a word, without a trace of remorse. I used to think that if I worked harder, was kinder, helped more, they'd love me like they always embraced Kyle after every mess. But maybe I was wrong all along. Maybe to them I was always just a shadow next to their golden boy. I remembered something one of my professors once said. Family isn't just where you grow up. It's where you learn to survive, sometimes through the very pain they leave you with. I looked out the window. The suburban night sky was still, no one knocking on my door, no one asking if I'd eaten. The only thing I had left was myself and the undeniable truth. I couldn't go back. I opened my laptop, logged into my student email. At the top of my inbox was a message from my advisor. "Laura, call me if you need a place to stay over break." My fingers hovered briefly, then typed a simple reply. "I'd really appreciate it if I could stay over. I truly need a safe place right now." Sent. At that moment, I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the Laura who stood abandoned on the porch beside 3 trash bags. I was someone moving forward, even if no one was walking with me. 3 hours later, I received a reply from Professor Keller, my public policy professor last semester. She had those sharp, observant eyes, but a voice so unexpectedly gentle, it always made students feel heard, no matter how silly their questions were. "You can come over tonight. Address is below, the guest room's always ready." That was all it said. No questions, no explanations. And maybe that's exactly why it hit me so hard. I didn't know when someone like Professor Keller, a virtual stranger, had become the first person to offer me a place to rest. While my own family had vanished without a trace, her house sat on the edge of Eugene, tucked inside a quiet neighborhood lined with maple trees already turning red. It was a tidy 2-story home filled with books, warm light, and the smell of something baking. She put me up in an attic room with a window that looked out over the backyard. There were no probing questions, no pity. She just handed me a mug of hot tea and said, "You don't have to tell me anything unless you want to. You can stay as long as you need, but if you plan on sitting around too long, I'll make you do the dishes." I laughed. After days of holding myself together just to keep from falling apart, I finally laughed. And like a dam breaking, I sat down at the kitchen table and told her everything from the empty lawn to the 3 trash bags, the cold phone call, and the hollow frame of what used to be my bedroom window. She didn't say much, but when I finished, she gently placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "They can take the house, but they can't take your worth." The next morning, while I was straightening up the living room, Professor Keller came downstairs with a printed email in her hand. "I just got this from a nonprofit called Fair Living Coalition. They're looking for summer interns to work on housing rights and community inequality. I think you should apply." I took the flyer and scanned the details. The program offered students a chance to research and work directly on cases involving illegal evictions, housing discrimination, and rental issues in low-income neighborhoods. My heart stirred. There was something deeply real in those lines of text. Feeling that maybe I wasn't alone, that I wasn't just someone pushed out of a home, but maybe I could help others avoid the same fate. I submitted my application that same day. A week later, I got an interview invitation from the program coordinator, Mrs. Elaine Rhodes. She was in her 50s with a raspy but steady voice and eyes that held yours like every word you spoke mattered. She asked me a lot, why I chose this major, what drew me to housing issues, and finally the most personal question of all. "Laura, what makes you care about rental fairness?" I sat there for a long moment. I had prepared a professional answer, something like, "I'm interested in community rights, but in the end I just told the truth because I know what it feels like to be left behind. to be treated like you don't exist in a home that used to be yours. I don't want anyone else to go through that. She didn't reply right away, just nodded. 3 days later, I got the official offer. I had been selected. The program started in May, but Elaine let me join early for some smaller projects. I was assigned to work with a team of attorneys who helped tenants being forced out of their homes before their leases ended, especially students and immigrant workers. In our first team meeting, I sat next to a woman named Mariah, a former law student who had lost her own housing in a fraudulent lease case. She smiled at me and whispered, "Welcome to where the people who got pushed out start over." That night, back in my attic room at Professor Keller's, I opened my laptop and created a new folder next to New Beginning. I named this one reason because now I had one, and for the first time in weeks, I felt grateful I'd been forced out of that so-called home, because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. I never imagined an internship could alter the course of my life. But those afternoons spent in the cramped office of the Fair Living Coalition, listening to people share how they'd been evicted despite active leases or had their rent doubled without notice, made it impossible to look away. There was a nursing student named Natalie, forced out of her dorm for working night shifts, mistaken for sneaking in strangers. A black student named Marcus denied a rental after meeting the landlord despite a flawless application. A single mom with 3 kids living in her car for 3 weeks after reporting mold in her apartment. The more I listened, the more a storm of emotions brewed in me. Anger, empathy, a burning sense of purpose. I knew these weren't just stats in a report. They were invisible scars left by a system that failed the innocent. One night while sorting case files in Keller's living room, I looked at the towering stack and wondered, why isn't there a place just for students like me? People who don't even know where to begin when housing issues hit. That's where the idea began. At first, just a scribble on a sticky note, a safe space for students, for low-income workers, for anyone without a voice. Then it grew with every story I heard, every face I met. I pitched it to Elaine. She paused, then said, "Don't just make it a paper, make it real." Elaine connected me with a university fund program, the Community Impact Fellowship. If selected, I'd receive $25,000 to develop a project with meaningful social impact. The deadline, 17 days away. I had no clue where to start, but I knew what I wanted. I called the project Haven Link, a network where students, single-parent families, and low-wage workers could access basic legal support, housing rights info, and connections to local aid. A place to ask, what do I do now? And actually get an answer free, fast, and without judgment. Professor Keller helped polish every word of my proposal. Elaine introduced me to a community lawyer who taught me how to add legal triage tools into Haven Link's response system. A classmate from my communications course helped me design a simple logo and website. Every little piece clicked into place like the world was quietly nudging me forward. The night I submitted the application, I hit send with sweaty palms, not from fear of failure, but because I'd never poured my heart into anything so fully. 3 weeks later, the acceptance email arrived at 5 a.m. I woke up to the soft buzz of my phone and read the bold line, "Congratulations, you've been awarded this year's Community Impact Fellowship with $25,000 in funding." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Then suddenly I cried. Not for the money, but because for the first time, what I carried inside, what had always felt too personal, too small, was seen, was trusted, was supported. That afternoon, I went to the coalition's office to tell Elaine the news. She just smiled and handed me a thick envelope. "I think you should start with this org name. List of students who've faced housing trouble, contacts for past volunteers, and a promise. I'm with you." I hugged her. That same evening, I logged into the university site and posted our first announcement. "Haven Link, a place to begin again. We're here to help you hold on to your home." I didn't know how far the project would go, but I knew my journey wasn't about revenge or proving anything to the past. 6 months after I left that empty house with 3 trash bags, Haven Link had grown faster than I imagined. Our makeshift office, once an old study room in the West Dorms, was now fully booked each week. We had 3 regular volunteers, a law student holding Wednesday office hours, and even an online forum where renters could share stories and find help. I was so busy I sometimes forgot lunch, but never once felt drained. In fact, I felt alive with a purpose. Then one October afternoon, while finishing up a grant report, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, the area code Medford. A. Burke. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I played it. Laura, it's Mom. I don't know where to begin, but are you okay? We need to talk. I set the phone down, heart pounding, unsure if it was confusion or something deeper I'd locked away for half a year. Within the hour, 3 more calls came in. One from Dad, one from Kyle, one from a landline I recognized. Grandma's. The same grandma who once told me, "You'll always be welcome at my house no matter what." I didn't answer. I didn't reply to the texts that followed. Over the next 3 days, the calls kept coming. Sometimes it was Dad's voice, stern, clipped, cold. "Call back. We're family, Laura. You can't just ignore everyone." Sometimes it was Mom, her voice shaky. "Just let me know you're okay. I won't ask anything else." Even Kyle left a message. "Laura, I don't really know what's going on, but we miss you. We really do. I listened to every word, every voice." Not one of them said they were sorry. Brie. No one mentioned what they had done. No one spoke of the 3 trash bags, of the house, of how I'd had to ask a professor for shelter and start over from nothing. They called as if we'd simply lost touch, as if this was just a misunderstanding, not a deliberate cold decision they made. I waited, hoping someone just once would say we were wrong. But no, all they said was call us back. Not because they understood, but because they wanted me to go back to who I was. The daughter who always stayed quiet, always forgave, always made everything okay again. I used to be that girl, but not anymore. One evening, as I was preparing a training session for the new group of student volunteers, Elaine walked into the office holding an envelope. "Laura, this came to the Haven Link office. No sender name, just your name and a postmark from Medford." I took it and slowly opened it. Inside was an old photograph. Me, standing between my parents and Kyle, in front of the Christmas tree the year I turned 12. A small card was tucked in with it bearing only one sentence. "Remember to come home. No signature, no address, no apology." I stared at the photo for a long time, then gently placed it in a drawer and locked it. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer expected anything from people who couldn't acknowledge their own mistakes. At night, I sat down to write Haven Link's first blog post. I didn't mention my name or tell any details. I simply wrote, "Some homes aren't taken away by paperwork or legal rulings, but by silence, neglect, and the refusal to take responsibility. Yet from those same voids, we can build new places of safety where you are heard, respected, and allowed to begin again on your own terms." When I hit publish, I felt a small weight lift from my chest. I haven't forgiven, and maybe I never will, but I'm no longer bound. Not by calls, not by photos, not by memories. The only thing I'm bound to now is the one truth I believe in. No one deserves to be treated as invisible in their own story. And I will do everything I can so that from now on, those who've been pushed aside can write their first new chapter, too. On a quiet afternoon in early November, as I was reviewing a file for an international student who'd been told to vacate her apartment over unidentifiable noise, the Haven Link phone rang. As always, I answered in my practiced voice. "Haven Link, this is Laura speaking." There was a pause, then a hesitant female voice on the line. "Laura, this is Helen. I used to live next door to your family in Medford. I'm not sure if you remember me." I froze. Helen, the silver-haired lady who always brought over baked goods during the holidays. The one who used to warn me about slipping when the snow piled high. Of course I remember. "Is everything okay?" "Oh, I don't want to bother you, but this morning I received a forwarded envelope addressed to you. It came to your old house." It looked kind of important. "Sent to the old address. Do you know who it's from?" "A law firm, I believe. Something from New Mexico." I didn't open it, but if you'd like, I can read a few lines from the outside. It looks like it might be about an inheritance. I nearly dropped my pen. A law firm? Inheritance in New Mexico? My thoughts raced as Helen read out the return address. The sender was Cruz and Moreno Legal Associates. I asked her to hold on to the letter safely and immediately looked them up. Their website popped up instantly with a contact number in the top right corner. Within 10 minutes, I was connected to an attorney named Benjamin Cruz. He confirmed that their office had sent a notice regarding an inheritance to my last known legal residence on file, which according to their records from last year was still my childhood home. Ebru, inheritance from whom? I asked, my voice tight. From your grandmother? Maria Delgado. She passed away last year and left behind a parcel of land in Santa Fe that was purchased by the local government for expansion of an ecotourism district. Your share amounts to $412,000 currently held in a transfer fund pending beneficiary confirmation. I went silent. I remembered Maria, her calloused hands always wrapping tamales for me every winter, the letters she wrote in simple Spanish, even though I barely understood them as a child. She lived so humbly. How could she have left behind something worth that much? Benjamin seemed to anticipate my thoughts. The land was once of little value, but 3 years ago, the city approved development of a luxury resort nearby. The land value surged. Her plot was reassessed and purchased at that amount. You're the sole legal beneficiary as specified clearly in her will. A birth? I could barely breathe. Then why am I only hearing about this now? A brief pause. The first notice, according to her files, was sent to your parents, who were listed as your legal guardians at the time since you were still a minor. My heart pounded in my chest. I hung up and one thought echoed loud and clear. They knew. They had known all along. And then everything came back to me. The timing of when I was abandoned, which coincided with the payout period of the inheritance, the hurried sale of the house, the abrupt move, the vague inviting messages afterward. Not one of them included an apology, not because they missed me, but because they were afraid I'd find out. That night, I sat alone in the Haven Link office as the streetlights outside cast golden reflections on my desk. I pulled out the family photo again, the one I hadn't been able to destroy before, because a part of me still hoped some of the past had been real. This time, I tore it in half. Not out of rage, but because I finally understood some things are no longer worth holding on to. 3 days later, I received an email from the law firm confirming that the transfer was underway. All I had to do was sign. $412,000. A number that slashed straight through the truth I'd been avoiding for so long. I didn't tell anyone. Not Elaine, not Professor Keller, not the student team at Haven Link. I needed time, not to decide what to do with the money, but to face the real question. If the reason I was abandoned was money, was there ever anything real in our so-called love? Less than 2 weeks after I got the inheritance confirmation, I received another email, this time from the Watkins Social Impact Fund. The subject line made my heart stop for a second. Haven Link selected for final presentation round, eligible for $300,000 over 3 years. I read it over and over, terrified I was imagining it. A grant from the Watkins Fund wasn't just about the money. It was a formal endorsement from the largest nonprofit network in the Western U.S. If successful, Haven Link could hire staff, expand to 2 nearby universities, and build a solid digital platform for student support statewide. I didn't tell anyone about the strange timing, the grant email arriving just 3 days after I uncovered my parents' silence about the inheritance. But something inside me quietly shifted, as if the universe had brought me to the exact crossroads where I needed to make a clear choice. On presentation day, I woke at 5 a.m., hands trembling as I buttoned my crisp white shirt. I wore a simple navy suit, hair pulled back, barely any makeup. Clean lines were the only way I could keep my emotions at bay. Elaine picked me up from Keller's house, where I was still staying while we prepared to move offices. She looked at me with quiet understanding and gently squeezed my shoulder as we walked into the conference center. The main hall of the Watkins Foundation gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. In front of us sat 8 board members, activists, business leaders, scholars, and 2 representatives from the state government. The room was serious, but not unfriendly. I opened my presentation with a story, not mine, but Chloe's. A freshman forced out of her dorm for refusing to pay an extra $5,000 reservation fee her landlord had made up. I explained how Haven Link helped her renegotiate, stay housed, and brought the issue to light through student media. Every word I spoke wasn't just information. It was a vow. In the middle of outlining our expansion model, the door to the boardroom cracked open. A staff member stepped in, whispered to Chairman Raymond, then turned to me. "Apologies for the interruption, Ms. Bennett," he said, calm and courteous. "There are people in the lobby saying they're your family. They're asking to speak with you before you finish." The room went silent. Elaine looked at me, not with concern, but with total faith that I'd know what to do. I took a deep breath. "Thank you, sir, but I'd prefer to continue." I'm here today not to resolve personal matters, but to speak for the community Haven Link represents. Heartbreak, Mr. Raymond nodded. Understood. Please continue. I turned back to the screen, pointer in hand, voice steady. Behind me stood an entire team that had poured their hearts into this mission. In front of me was a chance to create real change. I wouldn't let the past interrupt my present. Not this time. When the presentation ended, the board asked a series of questions from financial sustainability to outreach strategy. I answered every one with confidence. Elaine and I had rehearsed for this moment for weeks. As Mr. Raymond thanked me and said the final decision would be announced in 2 weeks, I bowed my head slightly, already feeling a quiet release in my chest. I walked out of the meeting room and saw them immediately. Mom, Dad, and Kyle were sitting on the sofa in the lobby. Mom stood up when she saw me, her face a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Dad had his arms crossed, his eyes betraying the tension. Kyle was looking down at the floor, not saying a word. Mom took a step forward, speaking softly. Laura, I know you're busy, but please hear us out. And I didn't step back. But I didn't move forward either. Not now, I replied calmly. I just finished the most important step of my life. I won't let it be tarnished by anything that hasn't been made clear. Mom bit her lip. Dad tightened his fists. Kyle took a step back. If we're going to talk, I continued, let's start with the truth. Not with emotions, not with old photos or vague messages, but the truth. I didn't wait for them to respond. I turned and walked away with Elaine, leaving behind the people who had chosen to discard me without any explanation. This time I chose to move forward. Not because they no longer mattered, but because I had finally learned the most important lesson. I can be myself even without them by my side. Braha. 2 days after the Watkins Foundation presentation, I received a message from Kyle. Can you give us an hour? I know you have no reason to agree, but please. I read the message over and over. Not because I was moved, but because for the first time in nearly a year, someone in my family was speaking to me without ordering, blaming, or placing fault. I agreed with one condition. We would meet in a public place briefly and with no beating around the bush. I chose a small cafe near downtown, the place I often worked when Haven Link needed quiet for report writing. Inside, the lighting was soft and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the underlying tension waiting for me at the corner table. Mom sat with her back to the window, gripping her cappuccino like it was the last thing holding her together. Dad sat across from her, looking thinner than I remembered. Kyle sat between them, but leaning slightly toward Mom. I pulled out a chair and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. No one spoke for a few seconds, then Mom finally spoke, her voice. Thank you for coming, Laura. I gave a slight nod. I know you don't owe us anything, but there are a few things, if you'll allow me, that I want to make clear. I looked her directly in the eye. Tell the truth. Not what you think I want to hear, but the truth. Mom swallowed hard. Dad remained silent, but his eyes flickered for a moment. We were panicked. Dad lost his job, the house was being foreclosed, credit card debt. It all seemed to fall apart at once. I didn't know how to tell you. We always tried to keep face, especially in front of you. Our child who was always so capable, always doing the right thing. I remained silent. Then the inheritance notice came. They sent it to the old address. They said the property would be transferred to you when you turned 21. I didn't know what to do, I asked bluntly. Or did you and Dad decide to just hide it? Dad winced slightly. Mom paused, then nodded. At that time, we really needed the money. We thought if we moved out, if we kept a distance, it would be easier to handle everything. I leaned both hands on the table, keeping my voice steady. You said handle. Do you mean selling the house, throwing my things in trash bags, moving out with no goodbye and staying silent while I search for answers? Is that how you handle having a daughter? No one said anything. The only sound was the spoon stirring quietly in Kyle's coffee. I lowered my voice, but every word felt like a knife. I didn't come here to forgive. I didn't come here to hear an explanation. I came because I wanted to say one thing clearly. I don't need closure. I've already had it on my own. I turned to Kyle. You're the only one in the family who reached out to me with kindness. You don't have to choose sides. Just live more honestly than I ever could at your age. Kyle lowered his head. I didn't blame him. He's young. He can still be different from them. Ibra finally, Dad spoke, his voice dry. You've always seen yourself as the victim, Laura, but do you know what we've had to sacrifice? I chuckled softly, not out of satisfaction, but because I was so used to this tone by now. If you think I'm the victim, then you've never understood me. I am the survivor, the one who rebuilt from the wreckage that you and Mom created. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and left enough money for the 3 coffees. Brr, I don't need you to apologize, but if you really want to make up for it, the only way is respect my boundaries. No more calls, no more vague texts, no more surprise visits. I'm not the little girl I used to be. I turned and walked out, not looking back. No tears, no anger, just finality. Outside the cafe, the December wind brushed past my coat. I took a deep breath, then pulled out my phone. A new message from the Watkins Foundation appeared. Congratulations. Haven Link has been selected for the final round, nominated for a $300,000 grant over 3 years. I laughed, but this time it was a real smile. Abercare, there was no more random luck. Everything was the result of my choice to stand up, even if it had to be alone. 3 weeks after our final meeting at the cafe, I received the official email from the Watkins Foundation. Haven Link had been awarded the full $300,000 3-year grant, plus an additional $50,000 in operational funding for the first year. I read the announcement while standing in the new office, a modest but bright space in a community support complex near downtown Eugene. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air. On the desk were piles of files for cases waiting for advice. In the hallway, 2 student volunteers were laughing as they set up chairs for a weekend legal training class. I looked at the scene, and for the first time, I felt that I had truly built something bigger than myself. The very next week, a reporter from the Oregon PBS station reached out. They wanted to do a feature story on student-led social initiatives. The content director, Maya Stone, said that the story of Haven Link has the impact we're looking for. I hesitated for a moment, but Elaine nodded. If you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it their way. The filming took 2 days. They shot at the office, the community classes, and during a legal consultation where I was talking to a young couple being forced to sign an unfair lease. Maya was very skilled. She didn't push me into emotional corners, but she didn't let me avoid questions about the motivation behind what I do either. At the end of the segment, she asked, if you could go back to that day, standing in front of the empty house and the 3 trash bags, what would you say to yourself? A burst. I thought for a long time. Then I said I'd say don't focus on what you've lost. Focus on what the pain will teach you to build. The program aired on Sunday evening. I didn't watch it live on TV. Instead, I sat alone in the Haven Link office responding to every thank you note and partnership offer that had come in from community organizations across the state after the broadcast. On social media, the hashtag spread quickly. Ibra. Some former students shared stories of being unfairly evicted. A single mom messaged to say that after hearing my interview, she'd decided to file an official complaint instead of walking away in silence. Not long after, a representative from a community investment fund invited me to speak at a national youth leadership forum. And then silence. No texts, no calls, not a single word from my family. No one acknowledged the TV segment. No one sent congratulations, no questions, no late apologies. At first, I thought I might feel hurt, but in truth, the only thing I felt was release. I realized I didn't need their validation anymore. I didn't need them to come back, and I no longer had anything to prove to people who had once chosen to walk away. One late afternoon, as I stood by the office window, looking out into the distance, Elaine walked in. She gently placed a sheet of paper on the desk. It was her request for temporary leave. I smiled. I'm going to do what Haven Link was created to do. Provide shelter and support for those who no longer have a place to return to. Elaine nodded, her eyes full of trust. That evening, I returned to my small apartment near Alton Baker Park, sitting at my old wooden table with a warm cup of tea. Outside, the streetlights cast a soft glow through the window. I opened my phone and looked at my contact list, where my mother's, father's, and Kyle's names were still saved, but this time I didn't delete them, and I didn't call. I simply tapped the mute icon next to each contact. I chose to keep my peace, my clarity, and the quiet strength I had earned through the months I walked alone but never gave up. Because sometimes family isn't where you come from. Bro, it's where you learn to stand and build the home you always wished you'd had. By February, as spring began brushing the bare branches outside the Haven Link office windows, I sat in our small meeting room preparing for the first round table with new partners. Outside, the volunteer team was setting up an intake table for students from a nearby university. Inside, I was finalizing the plan to open our second branch in Salem, where immigrant student rates are high and legal support is scarce. My life now consisted of reports, the quiet smiles of tenants who got to stay in their homes, and afternoons rushing from one office to the next. Strangely, I didn't feel drained. On the contrary, I had never felt more whole. One Friday afternoon, Professor Keller stopped by the office with a bag of homemade cookies and a few old newspapers. I saw this article on Haven Link in Voices for Justice magazine. I saved a copy to give to you. I opened the cover and saw a photo of myself reaching out to shake hands with an elderly woman, both of us smiling with a warmth that went far beyond just housing advocacy. Professor Keller sat down, poured herself some tea, and looked at me with that familiar, gentle gaze. "Laura, what do you think makes a home?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "A place you can walk into without needing to prove your worth, where you're trusted, seen, and allowed to be yourself." She nodded, said nothing more. But I knew she was one of the first people who ever gave me that definition. That night, just as I was pouring water into a glass pitcher in my apartment, the doorbell rang. I figured it was a neighbor. But when I opened the door, standing in front of me was Natalie, the nursing student from last year who once told me about being evicted from her dorm due to a misunderstanding. Now, Natalie was a part-time staff member at Haven Link and had just received a scholarship to pursue her master's in public policy. She smiled, holding a bouquet of white tulips. "You can't just let me have a private graduation ceremony without inviting the person who pulled me out of my darkest time, right?" I stood still for a second, then wrapped her in a hug. No words needed. People like Natalie, Elaine, and Professor Keller. They were living proof of something I only truly understood now. Family isn't where you're born. It's where you get to be reborn. As someone chosen, loved, and seen. Ibera once believed I'd been discarded. But the truth is I was set free. Freed from a place where love had to be earned through silence, obedience, and carrying the weight of others' fractures. I don't deny what happened. I don't erase memories, and I don't rewrite history. But I no longer let that history define my worth today. At the end of the month, Haven Link hosted its largest seminar since our founding. Nearly 200 people attended. Students, nonprofits, local officials, and leaders in community law. As I stood on stage looking out at the attentive faces in the audience, I didn't think of my parents. I didn't think of the house we used to live in. I thought of that first moment I opened the black trash bag on the porch, saw the old book, the cracked photo frame, and the scarf Mom knit me when I was 16, and I knew I had come far enough to understand that what I was looking for was never in that house. As I finished my speech, I ended with one simple but sincere thought. I used to believe blood ties were irreplaceable, but I've learned that sometimes the people who aren't related to you treat you like family, and sometimes the ones who are leave when you need them most. Then I paused, smiling. Real family is made of the people you choose and who choose you, not out of obligation but out of humanity. The room erupted in applause, but I didn't really hear it. Because in that moment, what filled my heart was a peace I had never known before, and I knew no matter where life takes me, I will carry that flame with me. The flame of someone who was once left behind but found her way back to herself and lit the way forward. Laura's story is a powerful reminder that not everyone born under the same roof deserves a permanent place in our hearts. Sometimes betrayal from those closest to us becomes the spark that pushes us to grow stronger and redefine our worth. Family isn't just where we come from, it's where we are seen and loved the way we deserve. Laura rewrote her story through resilience and courage, and that's something no one can ever take away.